right, guys, welcome back. It's time for some vintage. Yeah, my favorite deck in vintage is Esper Lurrus, and a few days ago, I was lucky to have a good run with the deck. So, yeah, let's talk quickly about the deck before we get into the games. This deck, Companion to Lurrus, it's the premier fair deck of the format, and I enjoy the Esper version with the better removal spells, the sideboard card of Containment Priest, which will solve the Oath matchup, compared to the blue-black version that does not have such luxury. I also get a few Lavinias for my trouble. I pay with a worse mana base with no basic lands. Sometimes you have 2 Underground Seas and white spells, sometimes you have 2 Tundras and black spells, and that's obviously a real downside. In the flex slots in the deck, I play a single Soul Guide Lantern to get up to a reasonable number of Dredge hates in my 75. I play Time Twister because the combo potential with Bowmasters is awesome against mainly non-blue. And aside from that, my list is very stock. I only play 2 Baubles. I play 0 Ponders. I play a single Daze. That card just keeps being good once each tournament, so I'm going to keep running it for now. If something better turns up, sure, I'll play it. The Delve spells plus Ancestral Recall is kind of the things you're sculpting your game plan around. If you have one of those cards, you want to trade 1 for 1 and hopefully get out ahead. Psychic Frog is a card that cannot be left uncontested. And Orcus Bowmasters is basically just your bread and butter. Sometimes it's clocking the opponent, sometimes it's an actual hate bear, sometimes it's a removal spell, sometimes it's just something to use your mana on to progress the board by time. It's not crazy good, but it's good. So I like the card. The mana base, pretty straightforward. 4 black duels, 3 white duels, full waste and strip, and then a single Lauren revealed as my land number, let's say 18.5. Pitches to force in a pinch, can even get cast in some games. So yeah, let's in the sideboard, aside from the priests, I'm working with a single Mindbreak Trap, especially when I'm on the draw against decks like Mono White Initiative, Jewel, stuff like that. It's good against all combo, obviously. Stern Scolding, Mirror Breaker, Field Sabotage, Consign, and Annul. Those are mainly there to counter One Rings and Coveted Jewels. But they can do different things. This can bounce the lock piece in play. This can counter Karn or Thassa's Oracle trigger. This can counter Oath, Breach, etc. A couple of more pushes for mainly the mirror, but also good against white. And then I diversify my Dredge hate because you can bring this in the mirror to, in order to cut all your forces, force negations, that is. But this is more likely to be in my opener alongside a Spell Pierce against Dredge. So the 0 drop matters. And yeah, then a Tabernacle to try and beat some pesky hollow ones out of the gates. All right, that's it for the deck tech. Let's get into the games. All right, this is round 1. I'm currently up a game against Mono Red Prison. I was lucky to have a hand that could withstand the Blood Moon Menace in game 1, so now I can sideboard and keep my hand with open information. I sideboarded out some counters that are not very good on the draw, and I sideboarded in my removal. I also trimmed the baubles to fit, basically everything, because I did see stuff like Bombardier, Magus of the Moon, etc. So I want all my interaction here. This hand is great. I have a Force of Will, so easy keep. Promox, Sol Ring is totally fine. Turn 1 Blood Moon. I don't think that's a good idea, because I cannot beat that card. It's a bit sad. I'm pitching the Twister here. I think that's just how things has to go. These cards are hopefully interaction later. Treasure Cruises should be a decent draw if I get to counter 2 more spells and then cast a Delve spell. My opponent is passing here, it looks like. So what does that tell us about the opponent's hand? Pyrogoyf, maybe? A draw Frog. So here, what I decided to do was not play Frog for 2 reasons. So first of all, my understanding of the matchup is, this matchup is a lot about not dying compared to try and win, and which hand would pass here, and I think my opponent has a Pyroblast. So I want to hold up Sabotage and Annul, instead of just playing the Frog into what I expect is, the Frog to get killed. Also, if my opponent has a Pyrogoyf, that is also very annoying, because I put land in the yard, land instant enchantment, and yeah, things can get a little bit dicey there. Do note that my Steel Sabotage can bounce to Chrome Mox. Okay, let's see. That's what I go for. So I do it on my opponent's turn, because if they have a Pyroblast, they at least occupy the red mana. Okay, so I like this play. Bouncing that one. My opponent replays it, so, I mean, already there, it's kind of decent, right? Here's Broadside Bombardier, so... That's a bit weird. I would expect my opponent to play that last turn, but maybe they wanted to. They just expected to get plowed. So my opponent is sacking the Soul Ring. This should also tell me that my opponent has more mana in hand. This should also tell me that my opponent thinks their chances of winning are very slim. I develop a Frog. I cast Treasure Cruise. I probe to see what's up, I believe. Let's see. Yep. So the mana thing was correct. Pyroblast was not correct. And it looks like my opponent just slow-rolled Bombardiers to make me spend my mana a bit poorly if I had a plow. Pretty happy to see this. My opponent draws a Blood Moon, and by the way, yeah, I probed into Force of Will, so I'm that kind of cat. So I match my opponent's top deck here. My opponent can now play a... Okay, sure. My opponent got rid of the Mana Crypt instead of the Chrome Mox. Unsure about that. So now I get to untap with Swords to Plowshare as an active Frog. I draw another Plow, which is good against, you know, some part of my opponent's deck, but worse against others. I will say, with the Crypt being gone, I'm pretty confident my Spell Pierce will get me there. Yes, we can reveal the companion here for good measure. So let's see if this Consign can do anything. For now, it doesn't look like it. I attack first because I actually want to draw into Wasteland. I Brainstorm. I find infinite counter magic. I don't have to deploy my land here, so I pass the turn because I don't know which interaction I'm going to need on my opponent's turn. Let's see. Oh yeah. So I get to consign a card here. That's more or less the ideal use for the card. Now I get to hold up Force of Negation, Force of Will, Spell Pierce, Plow. My opponent with a no play. I draw Bowmasters, which is a good card in case I need something to use my mana on. Let's say my opponent does not have a play, right? Yeah, looks like we're hard casting Trap here. In a situation like this, you can consider putting cards into the Frog, but I actually found it quite difficult to do so. Because sure, you want to shorten the clock on the opponent, but you also don't want to get rid of the piece of interaction that you might end up needing. Let's see. I draw second Bowmaster. Here I decide to pitch the Fatal Push, because at the moment it only kills a 2-drop anyway. I draw into third Bowmasters. Now I can deploy 2 of them. I draw Wasteland, which I'm sure I should just fire off against my opponent's Ancient Tomb. Yep. And at this point, my opponent can't really do much. I just Force Will this to have lethal, and yeah, that's all she wrote. Let's see how much damage. Yeah, it's plenty of damage because I have cards in hand. So, awesome start here. 1-0. Beat the mono-red deck. I only needed 2 games to do so. Oftentimes you need 3 games because, you know, the turn 1 Blood Moon can really surprise you. But yeah, off to a great start. All right, guys, quick message here. If you want to have access to my deck guides, my strategy articles, whether you want to pitch me a sweet deck to play on the channel, whether you want to look into coaching or simply just want to say thank you for the content I put out, please check out my Patreon below and become a Baron today. Now, let's get back to the games. Round 2 is upon us. Currently 1-1 against Dredge. Dredge is a super dangerous matchup. I cannot mulligan my hand. I have a Wasteland and Stormer's Crypt, so yep, that'll work. Opponent was on 5 cards, it looked like. Getting rid of 2 Dredgers and has a Grief that's scary. Gets rid of the Crypt right away. So this could be a tough one, but what did I draw here? Soul Guide Lantern. What a champ. I get rid of the Stinkweed Imp. So here, let's see. Yeah, with my opponent only having 1 card in hand, I like this over wasting the Bazaar. Chill, I don't care about. Grief. Totally fine. My opponent's going to take the Priest because that card is game over. My opponent is trying to force the issue here on the Lantern, and they successfully managed to do so. So now my opponent has 0 cards in hand. I just wastelanded my opponent. And let's see. 3 Bazaars gone. So my opponent's down to 1 Bazaar and some Noxious Revival. Draw Time Walk. Time Walk into a dig through time here. I can leave. Yep, I leave Tormod's Crypt in the graveyard. I go get Black Lotus and Containment Priest. And at this point, I don't think the game is losable. But let's see. Noxious Revival is my opponent's draw. But I have the misstep, and that's kind of game over here. Because now I can go Lurrus, replay Tormod's Crypt, and nothing really matters here. My opponent has 2 cards in hand. Let's see. Oh, the Black Force of Will, Contagion. But I have the Spell Pierce. Yeah, this is just... yeah, my opponent concedes here. So, speaking of playing to not lose, this is exactly what you need to do against Dredge. You need to make sure you don't lose at all costs. And drawing Soul Guide Lantern after getting griefed is for sure the recipe. All right, this is round 3. This is currently game 3. I'm playing against Coveted Jewel. I'm on the draw here, which is, you know, can be a little bit scary with a hand like this. I decide to keep... I don't think mulliganing for a force is how you win the game, but let's see. Turn 1 Bauble is, you know, it's good, but it's kind of what I wanted to see with this hand. Because I have some 1-mana interaction, I get to consign a Masticore here. I now have the choice between wastelanding my opponent's shop. Take it easy now, replay. Wastelanding my opponent's shop or developing Lavinia. I decide to play around, you know, second Fatty instead. It's very close. I don't know what to do in that situation. It turns out that I was rewarded big time here. I get to Spell Pierce a Synthesizer. And now I can choose again between Wasteland and Lavinia. But I think now, because my opponent did not have a workshop, I think I like the Lavinia. And now they actually did have a workshop, but no play. So a little bit of a weird situation there, but I think I like playing Lavinia out in a spot like that, because then they have to come up with Workshop and Worm Workshop and Masticore. That's 2 cards instead of 1, so... I passed the turn here. This day should be pretty bad, and Null is a pretty good draw. I decide to wasteland the Workshop because I feel like the creatures are how I lose this game. I could see definitely the blue source being the target there. My opponent draws the restricted Ursa Saga, which could be problematic. Let's see about that. My opponent is down to 7, though. So now I develop Psychic Frog. Now I'm totally leaning on the Lavinia to win the game. So now let's try and do the math here. So I have 5 cards in hand. If my opponent makes a token, they're down to 5. Then I can make the frog fly and I win the game. So yeah, I attack with both here. I don't think my opponent can do anything about it. They make a token, go to 5. I make my frog flying. I discard some cards. I keep the days for good measure. I guess I've seen Into the Floodmaw. So, yep, flying in for 5 here and taking down the match. Pretty excited to be 3-0 at this point. Let's see if we can keep up the winning. All right, this is round 4, and I think this is safe to say that this is the best game of the video. I'm currently down a game against Blue-Black Lurrus. As I talked about earlier, sideboarding out 3 negations and a twister for Nihil Spellbomb, Stern Scolding, and 2 Fatal Pushes. This hand is a pretty easy keep. We just hope it develops nicely from here. Could be anything between Bauble, Probe. So I decide to shuffle here. After peeking, I didn't have a land. Here I'm casting Gets Action Probe, I believe. My opponent's hand has a strip mine in it, and that's not necessarily good news here, so... Oh, easy now. So what happens here is I probe my opponent, I see a strip mine, they probe me, I misstep the probe, and my opponent kind of knows what's up here, so I get stripped. I'm lucky to draw a Tundra to stay in the game. So my opponent is down to these cards, I believe. 3 knowns, 3 unknowns. Let's see if this replay wants to cooperate. I've had some trouble recently. I don't know if you guys saw my 64 Vintage Cube run. And then even in the semifinals where I won the mana crypt flip in the actual game, the replay said I lost it, so it just ended the game. When I was a very low life total, I ended up winning many turns after that. I guess? Yeah. Let's see how this works. Looks like we're back here. I break on land. My opponent has a second land. We knew about that one. What can I draw? I draw another brick. So this game looks to be over, but I promise you it's not. I believe my opponent goes in a turn Bowmasters. I plow it right away. Don't really want to go to discard next turn. My opponent dazes. I daze. Pretty standard exchange. When you're low on lands, dazing is quite good. It kind of ensures your land drop. Here's a resolve dig through time. I draw Mox, which gets forced. I get to pierce a force. So that's a good exchange for me, but you know, still not perfect. I get wasted. Okay. I see. I draw land, so I could go frog, but I don't. I decided to go upkeep, dig through time. I figured that... So this is a good one to think about. So first of all, I know about the push. So these lands are gone. So in a situation like this, you kind of have to ask yourself, what kind of hand can I realistically beat? And my answer to that question is, I can beat a hand with, you know, more removal spells and the card Force Negation. That's kind of what I can beat here. So if I just play this card to get pushed, it doesn't really do anything, right? So I kind of need to dig through time into some more draw spells. That's my only way to win this game, I realized. My opponent found Ancestral Recall in the meantime, so less than ideal. Also a Brainstorm in response, which tells me my opponent does not have the counter. It resolves, I find Ancestral Recall, and Fatal Push. Okay, I like that. I get wasted once more. This is so good. So the Bowmaster token is getting in there. I draw 3 in response to the Bobble Trigger. I cast Demonic Tutor, burn to some good ones, develop my mana, cast Demonic Tutor for another Ancestral Recall. I have a full graveyard. So this is a way to get back into the game and have removal spells to cover Bowmasters. I get wasted once more. My opponent plays a Sorcery Speed Bowmasters. I like that play a lot. I push it. I draw 3 with Cruise. Yeah, this game is sick. I draw into Mox Land, Lavinia, so I'll make that play. I'll bobble. I'm not going to respect Bowmaster number 3. Draw from the bobble my own Bowmaster. So all of a sudden, I'm looking in great shape this game. I'm at 5 life, though. Opponent with 6 cards. I have 5 cards, but I have more stuff in play, but I have less life. So super even. My opponent goes Saga Lurrus to hand. What can I do here? I think I'm going to go Frog. I only have 1 black, which is very annoying. And I know I'm getting Fatal Pushed. Fatal Push that I've seen 9 turns ago, right? This game is pretty wild. So I go to 3 here. My opponent has a Saga going. I could have plowed, but I don't. Draw Push. And I'm holding up a couple of removal spells. I get to Bowmaster a 1/1 here. Very, very good. My opponent now has a 2/2 and a Soulguide Lantern in play. I have to plow this army. I don't like it because my opponent has a Lurrus in hand. Cycle Lauren Reveal, get my second black. develop frog, pass the turn once more. So, yeah, this game is awesome. I lose another frog. I decide, yeah, this is actually a cool play because I decide to block the construct, and then I want to play Bowmasters before damage to grow my org army. I think that's a good play. So now let's see how the opponent reacts to that one. I now have two Bowmasters in play. My opponent has their own Bowmaster, and they decide to kill the orc army in a response to kind of save the 2/2. So this game is weird, because 99 times out of 100, you want to kill your opponent's Bowmasters if you have the chance. So now, on turn 12, I have the time to put Lurrus into my hand, I believe. Lurrus to hand, pass the turn. Opponent attacks with a 2/2. I block with a set of Bowmasters plus Orc Army. I force a will here. I am guarded against everything. I can pay for Pierce. My opponent cannot cast Force because of Lavinia, so I get to remove my opponent's Lurrus for good. I even get to push a frog end of turn. Is this the turning point? That is the question. Here's Lurrus. My opponent pops my yard in response. This is a good example of why the Graveyard Hate is, decent in the mirror. I don't think necessarily the Tormod's Crypt mode is decent, but having the artifacts that can also cantrip in a pinch is decent. Psychic Frog is bad news, so now I need to attack in order to stay alive because I'm at 2 life. My opponent blocks, gets rid of the rest of their hand. I'm now at 5. My opponent draws Dismember, which is an incredible draw here because it builds my draw Punisher. My opponent can fly in for 3 here. I'm now at 2 life. I draw Frog, which is only a chump blocker at this point, unfortunately. I would have to give it flying and chump block, and then kind of draw out of it by finding a removal spell first and foremost. So let's see who can kind of brick first. But the pressure's on me for sure. Frog has flying. Here's Demonic Tutor. Demonic Tutor will find a removal spell, and that's GG. So that was a great game that started off with me missing a ton of land drops. I clawed back into the game. The opponent played very well. There was a Lavinian play all the time. My opponent didn't care. And they got me in the end with a flying frog. So well played. I'm currently 3-1, so I need to win a few more matches to get to the promised land. Round 5, I'm playing against Doomsday, and my research told me that my opponent does not have any creatures in the sideboard, so all of my plows are out here. I board in even a Null. I board in Stern Scolding. Not because they're great, but, they're blue and situationally you can trade with a card, so... Another matchup that is about not dying. My hand is fine. I have a Force, and now I have a double counter. Since I got the turn, I can develop a blue, so I could probe here, but I don't. I think it's very realistic that I need to force pitch probe, then pierce to win the counter war, and then I want my dig through time. So this is a pretty standard play that I see people, basically just automatically casting gets action probe a lot. This is something I put a lot of thought into. My opponent surveils. I wasteland afterwards. When I have my land drops, I might as well do it, right? My opponent fetches to pass here. Unclear exactly what the point is about that. I draw Bowmasters, which is a good end-step play if nothing happens. That is exactly what I'm going to do here. My opponent forces it, which I'm happy with. I'm not going to worry about that. I see Consigned to Memory. That means I now have the luxury to probe because I ensure my next blue card after having bobbled the top of my deck. So now we see a hand of Street Wraith, Doomsday, Oracle. This is kind of a classic holding your Street Wraith so you can win, out of the blue with your Doomsday deck. I think it's very debatable here. I would probably advise, just cycling and moving on, trying to find your cantrips to sculpt, but this is a strategy. So let's see what I end up doing here. I think I pass, and then I dig through time on the end step. the point about this is my opponent is trying to find the card Flusterstorm so they can go Doomsday, Fluster to win the war, cycle into the win. Or I guess Demonic Consultation, which wins on the spot. So here's End Step Dig Through Time, which is kind of the turning point for this game. I put 2 Bowmasters in the hand, which is very unconventional. I'm ready to pounce if my opponent ever cycles a Street Wraith. Oh, they draw Necropotence. That's kind of cool. So they decided to go Necro, mainly because Necro gets worse over time, where Doomsday still just wins on the spot all the same. And if you get to turn 6 Spell Pierce and Necro, you're very happy. Here's Bowmaster ×2. This is one of those free rolls where if you deal with them, sure, whatever, move on. But if you don't, you're in trouble. So all this time I could have put Lurrus into hand, but I don't want to do that because of Flusterstorm. So I passed the turn here. My opponent's at 8. It's getting down to the wire. I don't care about this Fatal Push. My opponent cycles, and they brick. They go to 5 here, then I can attack them to 1, and then you can never Doomsday. So when you win with 2 forces and 2 blue cards in hand, you can say in Vintage you kind of won comfortably, but the reality of the situation is Doomsday puts on a lot of stress on the opponent, and it alters the way you should play a lot. Obviously, I had great working conditions here, but I think even in those games, they don't have to be close for you to learn good habits. So I could have put my Lurrus into hand numerous times and then potentially lost to Flusterstorm. So yeah, just take your time here and curate the best possible game plan against the context. There's no such thing as a blueprint or a manual on how you should just always put your companion to hand or whatever. You should always challenge situations like that where it's totally fine in a matchup where this resource does not matter as much as in others to forego it completely. So pretty cool match here, and that grants me a win and in round number 6. All right, round 6. I'm playing against Oath of Druids. I'm currently up a game, and I'm looking at this hand. It has a Force of Will. It has a Lotus that can power out Containment Priest, so I'll keep this hand. My opponent's on a mulligan to 6. Black Lotus is fine. Emerald is fine. So here's a play I want to talk about a little bit. So we're not trying to throw anybody under the bus here. Just remember that. We're here to learn. So my opponent goes Tinker, but they don't float the mana. So what does floating the mana do, aside from just being, optimal, right? So if you float the mana, first of all, you have a mana. If you're gonna, hit your Citadel, go do whatever, cast a cantrip, you have a mana to cast cards later on the turn, right? Also, you can make me sweat about Veil of Summer. That is very marginal because realistically, there's no way if I have a force, I just let the Tinker resolve because of that. But the green mana, you should just fold your mana here. That's just how it goes. I force to will it. I keep the days here. So let's talk about this. I keep the days because 1, if I get forced back here, I expect to lose the game, period. If I don't get forced back here, my opponent's on very low resources, so chances are this days will be a hard counter for an Oath, maybe 3 turns from now, 4 turns from now, in a super scrappy game in combination with Strip Mine, or Oko, or Show and Tell. But my opponent does have the force here, so I guess we are off to the races. My opponent with no play here, so what does this tell us? What's on top of the opponent's deck? Can only be Force of Will or Flusterstorm, right? Everything else would have been jammed. Mental Misstep as well. So what can I do? I decide to play out the Lotus. I don't even know if that's correct. So here's where it's kind of crunch time. Black Lotus resolves, so that tells me, yeah, I clicked too much here. Black Lotus resolves, so that tells me it's a Fluster on top. That's why I go for Upkeep, double Bowmasters. Funny thing is, my opponent's 2 top cards of the library are double Force of Will. But I think since the Lotus resolves here, I think it's a good play for me to run out double Bowmasters, but who knows? I get double forced, which is a huge chunk of Magic Dad's life total. I want to play some more spells. A brick. My opponent's at 7. 7 is a good life total because it makes Atraxa a dead card on top of the deck. Here's Brainstorm. Here's Oath of Druids. So my opponent gets to do a lot of stuff here. But none of this matters just yet. I can cycle. See a drop on my opponent's deck, and I draw planes here. So you're saying there's a chance. I draw another priest, so now I can... Yeah. Did my opponent see this priest? I bet they did. That's why they didn't give me a token here that makes sense. So I let my opponent draw. Is that correct? I don't know why I let my opponent draw. Because they could have a Force of Will right here. And then it would be bad. I think I misplayed that one. But I instead priest. I get away with it. Attack for 2. I have another priest coming, which I'm very excited about. That I play out here before my opponent gets the chance to draw. My opponent fetches to 1. I don't know what you're looking for from 1 life, but my opponent concedes here. So I managed to beat turn 1 Tinker's Citadel by being incredibly lucky. But I mean, we take those. That means we march on to the top 8 of the Vintage Challenge. Next up is the quarterfinals. All right, top 8 time. I'm playing against Italian Grinder and Angelo Cadet, and we are playing the mirror match. I'm currently up a game. This hand is fine. I let the probe resolve because I plan to misstep a plow or ancestral recall, I guess, later in the game. I draw Mox, which is decent, so I get to turn 1 Time Walk. Let's see what I find. I find a plow, so now I have the time to put Lurrus into hand as early as turn 2. I think that's gonna be pretty good. My opponent breaks on land here, so the game could just be over. Now I have a tough decision to make. I end up playing the Lurrus with the logic that my opponent right now cannot play a plow. Fatal Push does not work, so I want to punish my opponent for breaking. If my opponent forces me, I will Pierce, which is a good exchange. Here's Force of Will. Here's Spell Pierce. Here's a misstep, and I misstep. So a lot of cards exchange, and I have a 3-2, which could die any minute. My opponent draws Black Lotus, passes the turn. So it looks like my opponent would just have killed this card if they really wanted to, or they're willing to take some hits while I don't have anything to recur out of the graveyard. Lurrus getting in there. I'm passing the turn. I like my Force Blue card. I like my Plow. I like my Bowmaster. Because of the situation, I play out the Bowmaster. My opponent's at 8 here after the attack. So I'm really putting on the pressure here. My opponent's only on 1 land. They still on 1 land, passing the turn. So here comes a play. My opponent cracks the Lotus for white, plows to Lurrus. I let that happen. I know there's another play coming, and that's a better play. So Bowmasters, I can Hardcast Force. And for the last remaining mana, my opponent can plow once more. So my opponent succeeds in slowing the game down here, give himself a chance. Because now I have 6 lands, my Lurrus is gone. You know, screw beats flood, right? So I like how my opponent played this under terrible circumstances. I draw another Force, which at this point I'm pretty certain ices the game. But my opponent has other ideas here. Tundra. So upkeep Bowmasters here. What's the absolute best outcome for me here? My opponent with 2 cards left. What's the absolute best outcome? That is my opponent forcing here. And I can pounce with my second Pierce. I draw Bowmasters, which is a good draw. My opponent draws a land and puts Lurrus to hand, 5 life. Draw Bauble, see a Brainstorm on top of my opponent's deck. So this is why I decide to go Bowmaster now, ping my opponent to 4, attack my opponent to 2. I draw Fatal Push. My opponent goes Lurrus, Lotus. Their last card is Brainstorm, so now the game is locked up. I draw Bowmasters, and I decided to showboat a little bit here. I now realize that I could have just plowed the Lurrus, play Bowmasters, ping my opponent, grow this one for exactly lethal. But we can imagine here that my opponent's on 3 life. Then this play is very awesome. I play my Bowmasters to kill itself, to get Revolt, kill the Lurrus to attack for lethal. So we take down the quarterfinals here. And yeah, so I'm not going to lie. I'm feeling pretty good about my chances at this point. I'm playing well. I'm drawing well. I get good tools to work with. And that combination is quite deadly in Vintage. See you for the semis. All right, semifinals time. Game 3. I'm on the play versus the same Jewel player that I beat in the Swiss. And yeah, I mean, this hand is a keep. The only decision is if I go turn 1 Frog or turn 2 Frog. So I decided to go turn 1 Frog here. The advantage is I free up more mana for turn 2. The second Frog plus Pierce, the Snowball, is going to win the game faster. The downside is I could just lose turn 1 here, right? The Frog gets met with Force of Will, pitching Kappa Cannoneer, so at this point I'm pretty confident I don't lose turn 1. My opponent has a modest Time Vault. I play out Psychic Frog, holding up Pierce, and I keep the Jet for potential Frog fodder later. Metamorph on the Frog is a scary play that should be okay for me because I'm hitting first. Lavinia is not a good draw. Let's see if I can find a white source off of this attack. I have more cards than my opponent, so obviously no block. I'm lucky to draw Scalding Tarn, so now what's the play? Do I play Lavinia to make sure my opponent cannot play, you know, One Ring? I guess that's mainly Mana Source One Ring. It's good against Outcome, but I guess I can pierce Outcome in most cases. Yeah, very, very tough call here. I think the more I think about it, plowing this one is better and trusting the Spell Pierce. Because even, you know, Mana Source Jewel I can counter. I think I end up jamming Lavinia here. Let's see how that works out. My opponent gets in with Frog. I don't have the Bowmasters, which is a good sign for the opponent. Here's Phyrexian Metamorph. Can't do anything about that. My opponent's copying Lavinia this time and playing an Ancient Tomb. Huh. I draw Lauren Revealed. I decide to attack first, draw the card. I pitch the Jet, because my opponent now has a Lavinia. Draw Strip Mine. That's not a bad draw. What should I do with the Strip Mine? I should probably keep my opponent off Masticore and stuff like that and kill the Workshop. Kill the Workshop. I put Lurrus to hand. I hold up Plow. And step Ancestor Recall. That's brutal. That's very strong. I now look super silly. So, Flying Frog, attack. At this point, I should plow it, right? I should just plow the Frog here, because this Spell Pierce is unlikely to do something. Yeah, I'm still too scared of a Masticore, I think. So now I've taken a couple of Frog hits. I'm getting super punished here. Spell Pierce doesn't do anything, and I'm getting killed slowly by the Frog. So right now I decide to trust that Lavinia is a strong enough hate bear to make my opponent's extra cards, you know, not actual extra cards. But I end up losing to Tinker Key here, and that's the end of my run. So when you lose, it's always more... How should I explain it? Then you always try and question if you could have won, right? But I'm not too big on putting the end result into that discussion. It's more what kind of risk I'm exposing myself to, right? Then if my opponent actually did X, Y, or Z, that's kind of not up to me, right? But I left those doors open. That's what's exciting here. So if I take the damage from the frog, I give my opponent free cards. If I kill the frog, I just lose straight up to a Masticore. So at the end of the day, I kind of have to pick my poison there, and yeah, I for sure got poisoned by the poisonous frog, and it didn't work out this time. It was a tough line, but yeah, I like how I played for the most of the tournament. Sometimes it works out, even bad plays. Sometimes good plays work out. Sometimes they don't, and yeah, I'm still not sure about this one. So let me know, what should I do with this against a quad or against a Masticore deck? Because this didn't look optimal at all. But yeah, who knows? That's why Magic is great, right? We can only try and search for the truth. That brings us to the end of the video as well. Another sweet top 4 in the books. Never going to complain about that one. I had sweet games. Played against a bunch of different decks. Mono Red, Jewel, Dredge, Mirrors, even Oath. I think the only thing I didn't play against was Mono White Initiative. So, I mean, just awesome campaign, and yeah, I was excited to do the replay run through as well. I had a lot of great games, so thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you back for more vintage soon. See you next time.